Round 24, New Zealand Warriors up against the Tigers. Home game for the Tigers, but they've brought it to New Zealand. Sold out in Hamilton. It's going to be a huge night out. Let's see how this one's going to play out. Hey team, welcome back to the Warriorholic. Before I get into this preview today, I want to take a quick moment to acknowledge the West Tigers. Only team that stood up and brought a home game to New Zealand this year to pay the Warriors back for their commitment they showed to the NRL during those COVID years, being away from home, starving New Zealand fans from live footy for a long time. So a massive thanks to them. So we really appreciate that. The NRL themselves sort of never really stood up and give us much other than that Indigenous game. None of the other clubs stood up and gave us a home game. So well done to the West Tigers. We really appreciate it. And to all of the crowd who are going to be there, show them some respect. No booing. Give them a standing ovation, if anything, at the end of the game, no matter how it goes, because they're the only ones who really backed our club. So, on to the game itself. The Warriors coming off the back of another scrappy win over on the Gold Coast there. Yeah, it's funny, you go up against 12 guys for the majority of the match and you think you're just going to run away with it. But I think a lot of times clubs end up trying a little bit too hard to exploit and find the space, and it gets a little bit too pushed. I think we were very much guilty of that in the first half especially. Just going for those tries maybe one or two plays early rather than putting the pressure on and building it up. I think SJ really took control of the game in the back half though. Really clinical with his kicking game, got those repeat sets of 6, tied them out and just waited for the opportunities to pop up. That's what we've got to see more of this week. The key words for me is patience, precision, and execution. We just can't be rushed. We can't try to score off every set or every play. Just build that pressure, tire them out, and the tries will come. That's the big difference between us and the Panthers. People say that the Panthers win in a boring way because they're so clinical. They just grind a team down, get the points on the board, and then shut things down. That's how we're going to have to play going into the semis, so it's time to step up this week and do it. For the Tigers, another tough season for those guys. They're sitting down in 17th there, likely to get the spoon. But you've got to give it to them. They've played pretty well in some of their past, 5 games. They haven't been spanked by huge scores. They did a really good job up against the Raiders on the weekend there, just going down 22-18, which I think they could have won. That's partially up to the Raiders, I think, really struggling for form at the moment. They're not able to create that many opportunities. Most of their tries are coming from kicks. So, the Tigers were able to compete with them reasonably well, but, still another loss in their season. So they'll be looking to come over to New Zealand, really put on a good show for the crowd, given it's their home game. A sellout, crowd up there in Hamilton. By all accounts, it's meant to be fine all day Friday. Then it's going to get really cold quick. Drops down to around 6 degrees around kickoff time, but no breeze. So the ground will be a little bit greasy. Ball will be greasy. So again, the Warriors have got to be really clinical with their hands if we're going to do a number on these Tigers. So just having a quick look at some of the key points for both teams. I've got to be honest with you, I haven't watched a huge amount of the Tigers games this season, but I did go back and watch the Raiders game. In fact, I watched the highlights after I watched the game because it's sort of weird. There's only 2 or 3 players, or a handful of players in those in their team that I actually noticed, trying to get a bit of an eye for some of the players I hadn't really seen before. And they didn't really stand out in the game, so I'm still not 100% confident I can give a fair rating on a lot of these guys. My initial instinct is they've got some good players. You've got Buller at the back there. You've got Taufua, who's playing on the wing this week. You've got Dane Lowry and Brooks in the halves are building a solid combination, but both of those guys are heading off to other clubs next year. In the forwards, you've got Api Coruscant, obviously, Blues hooker there. You've got David Clema. You've got Utakamanu, who played for the Blues this year for just that single game, but didn't get many minutes. And you've got Isaiah Papalii, John Bateman. So you've got sprinklings of good players who probably would be starters in other NRL clubs. But unfortunately, I think for the Tigers, they've got a lot of players who are either a bit young and not quite there yet, or maybe just they're not at real, genuine NRL level. So their recruitment's going to be a real challenge over the next few years. That said, you've got a guy like Buller who's had a standout first season. Will be getting close to Rookie of the Year, I would say. He gets really, he really competes for a lot of their high kicks, chases through. He's got a really good leap on him, so it's going to be a real challenge for Tuapiki this week. Brooks has been playing well. His kicking game's pretty good, but he still feels a little bit below SJ's class. Korothel, he's trying everything he can. He's actually quite involved, doing a lot of the kicking himself, particularly little short kicks. They got a couple of tries off on the weekend. But again, I wouldn't say he stands out as a class or two above the way Egan's playing. So I would say all of their top players we more than match, if not, exceed them in form and ability at the moment. So it's going to be a bit of a struggle for the Tigers. But like in any other NRL game, you just don't know on the day. Anyone can beat anyone. For the Warriors, key points for me there is probably the consistency of selection. So it's great to have, other than Chance being replaced by Tuaupiki, we've got exactly the same side 2 weeks in a row. I think it's really important to see guys like Berry, Metcalf continue to get consistent play. You can see their confidence building and their combinations building. And this is a really good chance for Tuaupiki as well to start building his combinations there, because we saw a little bit on the Gold Coast there where the timing was slightly off with the plays he was involved in, whereas Chance would have been normally the one who's in there doing the ball playing. So good consistency there. It's great to see Walker and Jazz both back together for the second week in a row. We've seen Walker, after he came back from that toe injury, he's just stepped up every week. So now we're really looking to Jazz to build that fitness, get his timing right, really have an impact on the game. Even though he didn't play big minutes, he made a lot of tackles at a really high tackle efficiency. So I think that's one of the things we're going to look for him. Doing a similar job to Bunty as a defending front rower, but also having that speed of an ability with the ball in hand as well. Rightio, let's have a look how the two teams stack up against each other. So over the years, we've played 35 games. They've won 16. We've won 19. So just like last week, one of the few teams we've actually got a winning record over since I think it's 1988 there that the West Tigers came about. Current season's form is a little bit different here. They've only had the 3 wins from their 20 games. We've had 13. They sit on 17th. We sit on 3rd. Minus 217 in the for and against for them. We're plus 121. Probably tells the tale of 2 seasons of a team that we both started out with not a huge amount of expectations. But luckily, the New Zealand Warriors have really found a culture. They managed to plug in a few real tide-changing players there to lift our quality 400%, whereas the Tigers are still stuck in that rut. Average for and against, for each game doesn't look quite as bad for them. 16 for, 27 against for a minus 11. So it's not, a massive 20 or 30 point gap there like you could expect. We're plus 6 with 24 for and 18 against. Looking at throughout their season there, they hadn't had too many real cricket scores put on them. I think, what did we have there? The Broncos 46-12, and then they had a 74-8 or something, or 74-0 actually, I think it was, drubbing by the Cowboys, but that was actually on the back of them putting 60-odd points on the Cowboys in the previous game. So, that was their best win, but they've had just a couple of really big scores. So, they've done well to maintain, some pride in their performance. They haven't just completely given up, so good on them. Rightio, next up there we've got the completion rates. Just as good, 75% for them, 78% for us. We really need to get that up into the mid sort of 80s before the end of the season there if we're going to be competitive in the finals. Tackle efficiency, both at sitting on 88%. There's nothing to scoff out there from the Tigers' perspective. Tries scored, they've had only the 55, sitting down in 17th, the worst number of tries from any team. We're in 7th with 85. Taufua there, he's actually featured in a lot of these stats. He's got 6 tries there but he's only 77th in the whole NRL versus Dallin sitting in 6th with 17, with 4 or 5 less games than the guys who are actually leading. So he's having an outstanding season there. A couple more and he could be up there contending with David Fusitua's 2018 record. Try assist 7 for Uppy in 44th versus 22 for SJ in 3rd. Probably a tale of their season, just struggling to create. Line breaks, what are there? 82 for them in 16th versus 115 for us in 4th. That said, on an individual perspective, 16 for Taufua versus 17 for Dallin, both sitting around the, 12 and 16th. Not a major difference there. Tackle breaks, interestingly, they were ahead of us there, 671 in 8th versus 647 in 10th. And Taufua again there was 75, sitting in 24th, ahead of Chans there was 72 for us, sitting in 27th. Next up, tackles made. This is an interesting one. I'm still not sure how you read this, right? They've made 6,667 in 17th. We've made 6,915 in 2nd. Is it a reflection you're spending too much time on defence, or is it a reflection you're making a lot of quality tackles and not dropping off them? They've got some of them, we'll see at the moment, they've got a lot of missed tackles, but still, I never really know how to read that stat. Bateman there, 661 individual tackles, sitting in 19th, just ahead of our man Taufua, 643 there in 20th. Missed tackles, this is an interesting one here, 627 missed tackles for them, sitting in 17th. We've got more, 643 in 14th, but again a reflection on the fact we've made a lot more tackles than them. I'm not sure how you read that. On an individual basis though, you got Apparel with 87 missed tackles in 3rd in the whole NRL. I noticed that on the weekend he dropped off a few there, and he gets his tackling position a little bit wrong. He gets really low when he's trying to tackle on the line, and guys just bump straight over the top of him. So he might be a bit of a target for our big forwards this week, hopefully. And Jackson Ford was 10th last week into 11th now, with slight improvement there, with the 68 missed tackles from him. So overall, you can see from a team perspective, there's not a huge difference there. I guess it really comes down to the ability to convert your opportunities, which we saw in the key stat there with number of tries scored. Right, let's take a look at the individual matchups here. First up, we've got not my man Chans as normal. We've got Tualpiki coming in for his 4th game, up against Buller there in his 14th game. So we've got a battle of kind of rookies. I guess Tane did make his first grade debut this year, but obviously played a lot less games than Buller, who has been one of their real shining lights. So what I've had to do here to make this sort of a clear comparison on how the two guys have gone this season, I've actually included both New South Wales Cup and NRL stats for Tane there, so you can get a bit of an idea how he's gone over the whole year. So he's played 13 games in New South Wales Cup, so that's a total of 16 versus 14 games against for Buller there. Average running metres for Tane is only 108 in NRL. He actually was, I think it was 160 or so last week, which was really good, but his average in New South Wales Cup is 165, which is bang on what Buller's getting there in NRL with 166. Tackle efficiency, 80 in NRL, but only 72 in Cup. For Tualpiki versus 77 for Buller in NRL, which is good. Tackle breaks here, this is a really good stat. 15 tackle breaks in 1st grade in just those 3 games, and 69 in Cup over his 13 games for a total of, 84. That's outstanding. Up there with some of the best in the NRL, if that was NRL stats. Versus 53 for Buller there. Line breaks with the 4 in Cup and none in the NRL for Tualpiki versus 6 in NRL there for Buller. 5 tries in Cup, 0 in 1st grade so far versus 4 for Buller. Look, Buller, I think you're going to have to give it to him purely on the fact he's played consistent NRL footy. He's really stood out in a team that struggled. He's highly competitive, as I said, in his ball chase. He's got good footwork. He's got great speed. He just seems like a guy who's going to be, I don't know if he's ever going to be in the class of, a Reece Walsh sort of origin contender, but he's definitely going to be one of those fullbacks you recognise as a real contributor to every game he plays in. Tualpiki as well, I think, with some consistent game time, I'd be curious to see how he went, because we know he had the most line breaks in Q Cup last year. We can see, the tackle breaks in Q Cup last year. He's got the ability to beat a man. He's got that real agile footwork. He's not the biggest guy, but I think he's got a lot of class about him. So, it'll be interesting to see how many weeks he gets here, because you wouldn't want to rush Chans back in off the back of his 3rd concussion of the year, particularly being a bad one like that, and with our position in the table at the moment. But I'll give this one to Buller, purely based on the fact that he's played a lot more footy this year. This will be a kind of interesting matchup of, I don't know if you call, I guess you call Dallin a veteran these days, up against Norfoluma. 14 games apiece there. Running meters 150, slightly down for Dallin there. He has been up as high as, around the high 190 odd meter mark, but sort of been down around 130 the past couple of weeks. Nofaluma right on that 133 mark. Tackle efficiency 71 versus 83, but Dallin was down in the 60s, the low 60s for a while there. So it's good to see that number coming back up. Tackle breaks 48 versus 57. Line breaks though 17 versus 6. 17 tries versus 5. We saw Nofaluma, he's really heavily involved. He's surprisingly good under the ball for a shorter guy out on the wing there, particularly on attack. But he got a clean line break there in the weekend through an intercept. And I think it was about on his own 20, and he was run down by the opposition 20 quite easily. So he doesn't quite have the top end speed. But the pass he threw, after cutting back into the left, pretty much running at full speed himself to 20, 30 metre pass across the field to Brooks, who didn't even have to slow down a beat to take the pass and then get it out to the, I think it was Charlie Staines on the wing there, who's out this weekend for really one of the best tries of the season. So he's got that class in him, but he's definitely lost a yard or two of pace. So I look for Dallin to exploit that. I'm going to have to give this to Dallin, purely based on his try-scoring feats and his consistency and his effort with his runs recently. But it'll be a good matchup. Then we've got Montoya up against Tupou. I don't know a lot about Tupou, to be honest. He seemed solid enough in the weekend against Canberra, but his stats are actually really good. So it'll be an interesting matchup. They're both rather large lads, but I think, like I mentioned in my pre-review, after the Titans game, I think Montoya over the past couple of weeks has stepped back into some of his best form of the season, right at the right time of the year here. So I'm curious to see how they go. 20 games for Montoya, 18 for Tupou, 152 running meters. Again, Montoya I think was up around 190 last week, so he stepped that up again versus 126. 72 versus 73% tackle efficiency, basically the same there. Tackle breaks 65 versus 75, so Tupou's got the most tackle breaks in the game, I think. Line breaks 16 apiece, 8 tries versus 11. Tupou's clearly one of their biggest attacking weapons. I'm not sure they've got the centres to really make the most of him, so I think that we should be able to control him relatively well, but he'll probably will have an impact on the game for them, but I'm backing my man Montoya to take that second step up again now to that real genuine class winger we know he's capable of, and I'd love to see Luke Metcalf unlock that left-hand side, get the man a try. This one, I've got to be honest, I don't know a lot about Toa, so it's quite hard to compare these two. I'm just going to have to go by stats, but Rocco Berry up against him there. Only 9 games for Rocco, but I think this is about his 5th in a row now, which is good to get him that consistent game time. 18 there for Toa. Average running meter is only 78 for Berry, and there's been a lot of criticism of that over recent weeks. I think we change our game plan every now and then to how involved our centres get, I feel, because we've seen Pompey over the past few weeks really step up the number of runs he's been taking, whether it's just a personal effort thing or whether it's like a direction, but I still feel that maybe we're not asking Berry to make all those as many of those tough hits off our line like we get from Montoya, DWZ and Pompey. Maybe a reflection on the fact he's not the biggest guy, so we don't want to break him, but also I feel like we're trying to keep him fresh for that kick chase, which he's an absolute gun at. And we know that that's something that we're really working towards, always kicking to our right. He's always the first man there, makes the first tackle and gets up and makes the next tackle, which I believe is one of our top sort of 4 or 5 work-on areas this season for the team, is having that world-class kick chase. So I feel like maybe we're sparing him from the dirty hit-ups to allow him to have that energy to make those kick chases, but who knows. Tackle efficiency 92.7. He's averaging 16 tackles a game, Berry, which is a lot for a centre, and with such a high tackle efficiency there. So I think, while he might not be getting the runs, he's definitely delivering in other areas of the game. Tackle breaks just the 20 for Berry, but in half the number of the games versus 68 for Toa, so he's a solid runner. So it'll be a good handful for Berry to control him, but yeah, he did a good job on the likes of Fafita and Kelly on the weekend, so I don't think he'll struggle here. Line breaks just the 2 for Berry versus 9, which is quite good for Toa there. 7 try assists each and 2 tries each, so quite similar in their creativity there, yet Berry's only played half the games. Hard to rate it when I don't really know much about Toa, to be honest, so we'll get that a 50-50, eh? Next up, we've got Adam Pompey up against Kipawa. Another player I don't know much about again, so I'm going to have to rely on the stats. Like, honestly, I struggle to see their centres really involved in the game in the weekend, so I just don't know. So what do we got there? Good to see Pompey finally up with his average running metres over 100 there. He's up to 102 versus 114. Tackle efficiency is getting really, really good for Pompey. He's up at 86.3 now versus 77. Tackle breaks 52 is a solid number for Pompey versus 25. Line breaks 6 versus 3. Tries 3. Try assists 8 versus 0. So there's one of the examples there that I don't think that they're able to put their wings away and maximise the potential, even though he's on the other side from Tapo. Mate, I don't know. Hard to rate again, but I think Pompey had a really quality game again last weekend, so I expect him to step up yet again. Hopefully unlock that left-down edge there and get my man Montoya a couple of tries, eh? Right, and a battle of another couple of guys who've sort of struggled for game time this season through injuries, but similar in the fact that they're really quick running style 5'8". They don't do a lot of kicking. They've got a good pass. They're both quite creative, but they are probably both their biggest impact is their running game. So 9 games for Metcalf versus 7 there for Lowry. 83 running metres for Metcalf versus 107 for Lowry. A little bit more there, so it's good to see that Lowry's contributing to their attack. But I think he's played a little bit wider out. He might even played some fullback at some point, which may mean why he's got the average high running metres there. Tackle efficiency, both really good defenders at up around the 90%. Try assist, 2 for Metcalf, none for Lowry. Line break assist, 5 for Metcalf, and I couldn't find a stat for Lowry on that one because he hasn't been playing in the halves as much. 5 tries for Metcalf and 1 for Lowry. So, I think they'll both have an equal impact on the game. I'd love to see this after a couple of games where Metcalf slightly struggled to really get his sync right and so forth. Some really good runs, but still just not quite as consistent as we saw in his first sort of 3 games there. So I'd like to see him step up this week and have a really dominant performance there. Maybe a 50-50 call, eh? This is where it gets serious in the differentiation between the 2 back lines. Sean Johnson having the career season versus Luke Brooks, who had a real tough start to the season but is starting to come back into form. I think particularly with the mental freedom knowing that he's going to Manly next year, he won't be a part of this. He won't be the key focus, being the $1 million man who struggled to deliver. 15 games for him versus 20 for SJ. Kicking meters here, this is interesting. 528 for Johnson, knowing he does 99% of our kicking, but only 246 for Brooks. And I think looking at Lowry's, he's down around 100 metres or something, so they don't have a very long kicking game between the two of them. But that said, Brooks does have a good bomb on him. He does have a good little subtle grubber on him, so we're going to have to be careful of that. I know Api will take a little bit of the kicking game off him. Tackle efficiency, SJ's got all over him with 92.2% there versus 80.1. Try assists again, 22 for my man SJ versus just a 7 for Luke Brooks. So struggling in the creativity. Line break assists, 18 versus 1. 8 tries versus 2. So statistically, SJ's got all over him. And I just think with the zone he's in, he has got all over him. We're talking a really serviceable, I don't know. You'll probably put Brooks in the top, or right around the middle of the pack, I guess, with SJ is going to be arguably the best halfback in the comp this year and potentially the Dally M winner. So look for SJ to dominate him again. Hopefully he's over that flu that he was struggling from last week. Back home where he loves to be. Hopefully he's grown out the neck beard a bit. I felt he struggled a bit with the clean shave there on the weekend. Looking for a massive, massive game from him again. Right, in the battle of the middle, I think this is where we should really dominate. AFB, again, a career close to a career best season for him. Looking at some of the stats there, I think he's second in post-contact metres, about 5 or 6 metres behind Payne Haas. He's about 5th in overall running metres, and that's going up against fullbacks and the like, just behind Payne Haas there. So those two battling out for the the best prop of the season. Up against Utakamanu, who, I was surprised he got that call up into the New South Wales team. Only got a few minutes there, then got dropped down. Just seemed like a really, really odd selection, and he seems a little bit down on confidence and has had a few injuries since. So 20 games for AFB versus 18. What do you got there? Average running metres 169 versus 111. 64 average post-contact metres versus 44. Tackle efficiency both in the mid-90s there. Tackle breaks 59 versus 42. 6 tries versus 2. You kind of have to expect AFB to dominate this one here, but I'm not sure what the injury was that Kamanu was coming off the back of, but he didn't play last week, so he might be either fresh or still be a little bit hindered. Be curious to see how it goes, but AFB all the way on this one. Alrighty, Mitch Barnett up against the old wily David Clema. So watching Clema in the weekend, he didn't feel like he was having a huge impact. He seemed serviceable, but looking at the stats, they are actually pretty good. What have we got there? 10 games for Barnett versus 20, so he's played every game there for the Tigers. 138 metres versus 143, so solid there. Post-contact metres though, I was surprised Clema has more than Barnett, because Barnett does know how to break a tackle. 54.2 for Clema versus 51.3, bugger all in it, to be honest, but 91% tackle efficiency versus 99 there for Clema. That's outstanding. Tackle breaks 19 versus 21, so very even, and 2 tries versus 1. So very similar kind of players, although Clema's probably a little bit slower, but a little bit bigger. We see a lot more energy from Barnett. He does come flying out of that line to make those sort of game-changing or momentum-shifting hits every now and then. You don't see that so much from Clema, so I'm curious to see how this goes, but I back my man Barnett to at least match him, if not exceed him in his impact of the game here, just purely on the fact that the full pack he's got around him. This one will be a really interesting litmus test for Wade Egan. We've just seen him continue to improve, continue to build his craft, and he's really starting to show his true potential this season, to the point I've gone from questioning whether he was ever going to be the guy who'd have the ability to take us deep into the finals and win a comp, to me sitting there thinking, well, there's not many guys I would actually swap him out for. And right now, to be honest, I'd probably only swap him for Grant, and even that's hard to say. He's just gotten to that point. He's so good at particularly playing with SJ, world class, and he's coming up against a genuine world class, first choice state of origin hooker there in Korothau. So let's see how we can really step up here and prove that he is that top echelon of hooker in the comp and dominate this matchup. 16 games versus 17 there. Average running meters 53 versus 57. So they're not the biggest running meters from the hookers that you see from the likes of Grant and Cook, but they're both solid, and we've seen Egan running a lot more over the past 2 or 3 weeks. Tackle efficiency is where we've got a bit of a difference here. 93.2% and Uppy with 87, but as I said, the third most missed tackles in the comp. Try assist 5 versus 7, and that's probably a reflection on SJ and doing a lot of the try assist work there for us. Uppy got a couple in the weekend with his kicks. One of them was an outstanding cross kick to Nofaluma, but the one that he gave for Brooks was about 2 metres offside, and it was a complete and utter shank. So we'll call that a fluke. So, but he's capable of setting up a try there. Line breaks 9 versus 6, and tries 5 apiece. So very, very even. Uppy kicks a bit more, but other than that, I think they're both very, very similar. They've got that little subtleties out of dummy half that puts the opposition in 2 minds. Are they going to run? Are they going to engage? They've both got a wide, crisp pass. But Uppy's carrying like that team on his back. He's playing like 2 men to try and keep them in it. whereas Egan is just a complete sync, part of the sync of our whole team. 50-50, very hard to call, but I really hope Egan can step it up and just completely dispel any critics who are left out there questioning his ability. Jackson Ford, the new cult hero for the Warriors here, on an edge up against the old Warrior who people were really hoping would come back rather than going to the Tigers. But both having very similar seasons. I think Papalii sort of struggled a little bit in the initial stages. I don't really get the impression he's overly happy there. There are rumours that he wanted to come back home because he's homesick, or whether it was just an excuse to try and get out of going to the Tigers when he saw how mud they were. I don't know. But 18 games for Ford versus 19 for Papalii. 103 running metres versus 118. And again, that's something I don't think we were really using edges as runners as much in the early parts of the season, but we've really seen both of their running metres come up over the past few weeks. 90% tackle efficiency versus 93. Average of 35.5 tackles a game versus 33.6. So they both get through a power of work on defence. Line breaks was surprising here. 7 for Jackson versus 3 for Papalii. I would have thought there would have been more there, but tackle breaks 39 versus 48. Now we know that Papalii can get through a tackle with his powerlifting background. He's way stronger than he actually looks. He's not the biggest back rower in the game, but he's definitely one of the strongest. 4 tries versus 2. Very similar. I'm saying Jackson's probably the find of the season, particularly from our club perspective. No one saw him coming. He's growing into a Kevin Campion just absolute workhorse out on the edge there. Papalii is similar, so let's see how it goes. I think it's going to be a very even matchup, and whoever wins this one here could have a big impact on how which edge manages to get over the other side. But I rate Ford to hold his own here. Marata Niakorea with a bit up and down with his injuries and his suspensions and yellow cards. He's had a few too many of those this year. Granted, last week one was a complete pile of bullshit. Up against John Bateman, who's a bit of a controversial figure after running away on the Raiders there and then coming back over in his first season. 15 games for Marata versus 17 for Bateman. Average running meters 98 versus 108, not too much in that. Tackle efficiency 92.2 with 27.5 or 27.6 average tackles per game. For Marata, 94.4% for Bateman, but 38.8, so he's making a few more tackles there. Line breaks 5 versus 2, tackle breaks 23 versus 17, and 2 tries apiece. So, Bateman's probably a little bit more in a Ford kind of mould, an absolute workhorse, gets through a power of their defence, does a lot of the clean-up work, versus Marata's been used as a real attacking weapon recently, using his brute strength and his running ability there. That said, Bateman's he's one of those guys that just seems like a real nightmare to get on the ground. There's not much to him, but he can kind of slide out of a tackle and bounce around, gets away a lot of offload. So it'll be an interesting matchup. So 2 contrasting styles here, both in physique and the way they play, but both capable of having an impact for their teams. I'd really like to see Marata step up with no penalties, no time in the bin, no on reports, play a really, really solid 60, 65 minutes out there on edge and have a massive impact. Hopefully get another try busting over because their line defence isn't that strong. Up to the Wily Fox, our captain fantastic up against Pole. Hard to compare. 17 games for Taufua versus 19. 129 metres versus 89. Tackle efficiency of 94.3 with 39 tackles a game versus 95.8 with only 24 a game. Tackle break 16 versus 23. Try assist 4 versus none, 1 try versus 3. So Polly is more of an individual contributor in that he bashes and crashes his way through. He's kind of a link man there versus Tauhu's the kind of centre of our world. He's the mood maker, he's the leader. He ball goes through his hands a lot, he's creative. It's just great to see him get a try on the weekend as a reward for all of the effort that he puts in that sets up so many other tries. So it's hard to see Polly sort of being able to stand out against them, but you can't underrate anybody in NRL level. But I expect another big game from Big Tohu. Hopefully, Dylan and Jazz and Curran will be able to take up a bit of that slack for him in the second half this week. But Tohu to hopefully quite easily dominate. Rightio, back to what I was all fired up about in the middle of the season there. Sort of died down a little bit for a while there with injuries, but we're back to having one of the most impactful benches, I think, in the comp right now. And for me, this is probably the bench that we're going to see playing every week, unless they decide to do a bit of rotating or if there's some injuries. With Dylan Walker there, Jazz, Ciro and Curran. A lot of high energy there, particularly in Walker, Jazz and Curran. We've got a lot of versatility. I think there's maybe guys you'd like to have in the on the bench there instead of Ciro, but I think his versatility and his cover of dummy half justifies his position going forward. He's got the best pass out of the non-specialist hookers, so that's why I think he's been selected every week now. On their side, we've got Simpkins there, Seifert, I guess you'd say that is, Twal, and for the Tigers, we've got Simpkin, Seifert, Twal, and Blow. I don't know how you say that one. We've got their hooker, 2 props, and a back rower. I struggle to see too much game-changing impact out of that group. Twal's a serviceable prop, but he's not going to be running out there and dominating AFB or Barnett or the like. Seifert, I saw him out because he stands out with his blonde hair, but didn't really see him do anything in the weekend. So, Simpkins, far from a world-class hooker. So I think they're really going to struggle with their impact off the bench. And when we get into the second half, that's where we're really going to put the foot down. I think we should have it over them in a fitness perspective. They're going to have to do the travel, whereas we're sitting back at home just down the road there in Hamilton. So how do we wrap all this up? Again, massively thankful to the Tigers for showing us, the love and bringing that game to New Zealand for the Warriors and our fans after what we did during COVID. And I got massive respect for the Tigers fans who've stuck through this really tough period. I think the big difference between them and the likes of the Warriors and our ability we've had to turn this team around is we were kind of struggling a lot to do with one has been away during COVID, not having our pathways there and our teams in place. I don't, while there have been questions by some people at times, with Robinson and his ownership, particularly around what happened with Lodge, we'll never know. But you can't question a guy who's invested what he's invested in and given this club to make them successful. So he's not going to hinder their performance. And then he's left Cameron to run the show, Cappy and Webby to run the football. Whereas at the Tigers, their board just seems to get in the way the whole time. You see them going appointing a recruitment director there. What's his name from Manly there, without even consulting Benji and Sheen. So they had no idea who this guy was who's coming in, and it seems like they're completely out of sync. So it's the back office stuff that I think is really making the Tigers a team that not many people want to go to. We've seen them buy some of these good players in, but I don't think you can buy a culture by bringing in a few good players. You see that the Bulldogs are sort of struggling with that as well. So I think it's really going to take some big changes in the boardroom, in the back office, bring in some leadership that gives high quality players confidence to come to the club. Is Benji the right guy? Who will know until he actually gets the team himself. But for now, well done to the Tigers fans for sticking this out. You can see what us Warriors are going through this season and how much fun footy could be when your team does start to get it right. But from our perspective, this is where it has to go up a level. It was great to grind out those 2 dirty wins that show that we can win a sort of arm wrestle type battle or a grubby game. But now we just have to step up and be absolutely clinical against these teams that we should put away. We're going to have a massive crowd behind us, even though it's an away game technically. I'm looking for a massive score here. I think we should be able to put 40-odd plus on these guys. We shouldn't let more than 2 tries in with their attack. So we need a 30 to 40 point winning advantage to get us up their level with the Broncos. Can't wait for it. Wish I could have been up there, but for those who are going, enjoy the sold out crowd, enjoy the atmosphere. It's going to be a good night for it. Shouldn't be any rain. Let's go the Warriors.